Welcome to the Writing with Purpose podcast, where I, Anna Woolliscroft, chat with fellow writers and outdoor enthusiasts about how we can embrace creativity and curiosity to live a life full of adventure that doesn't feel like hard work. I delve into exploratory conversations about my two loves in life, writing and nature connection, as part of my mission to share the well-being benefits they both bring. It's wonderful to have you here today. In this week's episode of the Writing with Purpose podcast, I chat with Jackee Holder, a writer, coach and nature enthusiast whose work bridges the gap between storytelling, self-reflection and the healing power of the natural world. This is the fourth episode of my 7-part journaling series, a writing practice which is very close to my heart. In our conversation, which is part 1 of 2 episodes, Jackee offers her take on the intersection between journaling, writing and nature, and quotes powerful scientific facts and seminal studies about the benefits of this skills-based practice. She also shares several exercises and activities that you can try. Welcome, Jackee, to the Writing with Purpose podcast.
Oh, well, morning, Anna. It's lovely to be here. And thank you so much for inviting me onto the podcast.
Oh, you're more than welcome. I'm very, very excited to chat to you this morning, Jackee, because you are a writer, coach and nature enthusiast whose work bridges the gap between storytelling, self-reflection and the healing power of the natural world. And we met in Barcelona in November last year at the first Barcelona Journaling Festival, because you were one of the incredible speakers and who I was very fortunate enough to learn from and also mingle with, because it was very accessible, the festival, wasn't it? We were all able to mingle together. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I do share your belief in the transformative power of writing and nature connection. And you kind of encapsulate everything that I wanted this podcast to be about. The two loves, writing and nature connection. So I'd love to in fact, let me invite you first, if that's okay, to give a brief overview of how you came to do what you do today and perhaps what a typical day or week looks like.
Oh, that's a really good question. When I was at primary school, and certainly when I was at secondary school, I really wanted to be a teacher. I loved learning. School to me was my haven. Apart from my local library, which I will talk about, there was something about education that really just sat well with me. And I had a lot of stuff going on at home. I had a great childhood and I had a difficult childhood. You know, they both existed in the same. So for me, school was an escape from some of the stuff that was going on at home. And so I wanted to be a teacher, but I was really good at expressing myself creatively. One of my oldest friends from primary school, reminded me not so long ago that when we were in our English class, we were all made to write poems. You know, teacher would read something, then we'd write a poem. She said I would sit there and write 2 or 3 poems whilst the rest of the class, you know, struggled to get out one poem. And I'd sort of then go around helping other people to write their poems. So there was definitely a place inside of me that was able to express words. And I think, you know, if I could go back to that young girl and find out what she was writing about, I think that would be such a gift to me. And I do have this memory of when our local library first opened in 1972, I think it was. And they got our, I hope I got the year right. I'm just trying to think about, anyway, I'll come back to that. They got our class to enter a writing competition and write a poem or a story to enter this competition. And I came second.
Well done.
The poem was displayed in the foyer of the library. And I'll never forget the feeling that I had about my uncle walked me down to the local library and we stood there in front of my words staring back at me. So I think all of that contributed to me wanting to be a teacher. And I had great teachers at primary school.
Yeah.
My class teacher, Mrs. Hines, was absolutely fantastic. But I wasn't good at maths. That's the problem. So I kind of didn't go into teaching. Instead, I went to university. I did a degree in government politics.
Wow, that's different.
Very different, but I loved my government and politics A levels. I didn't have a great English teacher at A level grade. I loved sociology, but for some reason, I kind of veered away from sociology and I just chose a subject that I really, really enjoyed. I think I loved the being able to talk about current affairs.
Mm,
Young black woman in South London, I feel like it gave me a bit more of it brought more of my voice into the subject.
yeah.
I went and did government politics, which actually was a really, really interesting degree because history was my favorite subject at school. So it was a combination of history, culture, politics, sociology, and economics. And it brought all of those disciplines together. So it wasn't a boring degree. I really enjoyed it. But I was really clear when I finished that I didn't want to do anything to do with government politics.
Right.
My head of department, he tried to convince me to go into the police force. He said they need people like you in the police. And I remember that conversation with him when he called me into his office. And I sat there as he was speaking to me, thinking, but you don't know what my lived experience is of the police.
Mm,
As a young black woman growing up in South London with brothers who have all been harassed, stopped and searched. We had uprisings when I was still down in London. And I just thought, no, no, that's
yeah.
not. And what it did was it really gave me a bit more clarity about the direction I wanted to go in. So I ended up becoming a youth and community worker
Wow.
in the London Borough of Hackney. And honestly, Anna, it was one of the best jobs I've ever had. It was like somebody giving me the best of everything that I loved and paying me to do it.
Even better.
It's unbelievable. So I really grew. If you imagine you come into a job and you're a sapling, I grew that sapling in that role. Phenomenal.
Yeah, what a lovely metaphor.
Yeah, well, that's how it felt
Mm,
because it felt like this sapling didn't understand fully what soil it was in
mm,
and all the different parts of my work. So I was running groups for young women. We were running groups for young mothers. Ended up organising a training and development day for part-time youth workers, which was just phenomenal. And because of that, I got recognised for, I guess, the energy that I was bringing to the role, and I got fast-tracked onto a training the trainer program,
mm.
and that literally was the beginning of the early roots of me becoming a coach
Yeah.
that training, it was a 6 month program. It was run by the Inner London Education Authority, the GLC, which was just a phenomenal institution in London in the 1980s and 1990s. And it really set the ground, it set the foundation for me in knowing that I had this ability to empower individuals in groups, to empower teams, and to empower individuals as well. And because I had an experience of having a coach, they weren't called coaches at that time,
Mm,
non-managerial supervisors. And because I was given one of those as part of our professional development in my role, my work with her was life-changing.
yeah.
I never forget, she asked me this question one day, sitting in this big room, having this 2 hour session. And she said to me, what do you want for yourself? And I remember it's almost like everything else in the room disappeared as I felt the full attention of her focus on me, which allowed me to go inside my inner life, talking about things that I'd always thought about, but perhaps didn't express them
Mm.
in detail to others. I was now given the space for somebody else to facilitate that development for me. It was a life changer.
Yeah, you'd experienced it a lot by helping people, giving them the space, but then when it was mirrored back to you, almost you felt the power of it.
Oh, I really did. I'll never forget her. I don't even know her. I can't even remember her surname, but I do remember her first name. Her name was Rose.
Mm.
It was the quality of her presence and the quality of her listening. And I really do feel that I embodied that, that I took some of that. You know, she really was a role model and an inspiration for me. Perhaps she saw things in me that were part of who she was, but I definitely know that I came out of that experience a more awakened individual.
Yeah, yeah. What the experience had a little light inside you, and you sort of felt that there was more of a, you knew where you were going in the direction that you wanted to.
I ended up leaving that role because I was what you call an unqualified youth and community worker, which meant I didn't have the professional qualification as a youth worker. And then I ended up going to do my postgrad in youth and community work at Goldsmiths College, which was fantastic. And then I left. And then I went on to step into learning and development. And that was the beginning of my journey, leading me to becoming leadership and executive coach, which I've been doing for years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, everything happens for a reason, and everything that you've gone through, there was a definite sort of journey there with this direction ahead of you, this sort of end goal almost that as you were talking, you know, you can tell you're very passionate about it, and you know the memories of it mean a lot to you. But it's always like the whole thing has blossomed for you in every stage. You've taken something from every stage and developed.
And it's interesting you use the word blossomed. I think so many things have blossomed from that early part of my career journey. And I really feel like I've grown different branches, like from that trunk of that sapling which grew into a tree, all these different branches have kind of grown and stretched and flourished, and they have blossomed, and you know they've leaves have fallen off and leaves have been added on as different parts of my career and my vision have really kind of matured.
Mm. And yeah, as you're talking there, I'm getting the vision of the tree in front of me, and it doesn't just go up, does it? It goes to the one side, you know, in all different directions, and all of those things have sort of come together and just nourished, maybe is the right word, the trunk of you going up, but you know, from all of these different facets around you, if that makes sense.
It
I
makes
probably didn't explain that very well.
it. No, I don't. I think you did. And I want to just say something very quickly about this. It's really interesting that we're in the early part of this conversation today, and we've already started to use really strong visceral metaphors of the tree.
Yes.
You know I love trees. You know I talk a lot about trees. I write a lot about trees. But it's interesting for me because I didn't know where we were going to go at the start of this conversation, that this metaphor of the tree has visually illustrated what I have experienced. And I
Mm,
think that's for me as a coach, I'm often seeking different ways of engaging individuals, coaches, to gain different perspectives through different ways of thinking.
yeah.
And I think the metaphor of the tree does that really powerfully. Most people can relate to the metaphor of the tree.
Mm,
Often takes you outside of your normal mode of thinking. Because as coaches, we're creating spaces where we want to create an environment where the client is able to take what is happening to them externally and explore that internally,
yeah.
arrive at their own levels of awareness and insight. And we want to be creative and innovative about the way that we do that.
Mm,
And I'm often looking for ways to help the client move outside of their normal mode of thinking with the kind of traditional kinds of questions that we might ask in coaching, and to use metaphors from nature and from trees, the archetypes and the
Yeah.
metaphors associated with nature and trees, because I think they're very rich and fertile. I think they stimulate our thinking. If we think about neuroscience, neuroscience really holds this concept that you've got to ask people things that are different if you want them to think differently.
Mm. Creating those neural pathways and the new ones so that everything doesn't become stagnant.
Yeah, because most people are stuck because the neurons are deeply embedded in the old ways, the familiar ways, the automatic or automated responses that people make.
Mm.
And I just feel like there's a whole body through, nature journaling, expressive writing. I bring in a lot around journal writing into my work with leaders in organizations. And it's amazing how, when you create that sort of container in a coaching session, and, someone might just give me a little hint. I remember I worked on a coaching service for GPs for 4 years from COVID. We
Mm.
finished service only finished last year. And I remember one GP was having really difficult problems with her young daughter and just feeling really overwhelmed, stressed out, stretched in almost every way. So there was emotional kind of disturbance and kind of uncertainty as she was kind of thinking about her home life.
Mm.
And in the course of the conversation, she just mentioned very briefly something about her garden. And there it was. A door opened and we began to explore her relationship with her garden.
Yeah.
To tell me the story about what does she get? What does it feel like when she walks down the garden path and she goes into her greenhouse? And then she began to describe what it was like when she's got her hands in the soil,
Yeah.
what that does for her worries. It's almost like it calms her down.
Mm.
Now we know from the research that when people are out in forests, in woods, even in green spaces, in urban environments, that the sights and the sounds of nature has an impact on our sympathetic nervous system. We know that. Even listening to bird song lowers your heart rate.
Yeah.
So I'm always thinking, well, what is this individual that I am with? What is their relationship with nature like? Now, I know not everybody has a great with nature. I don't particularly like going into woods by myself.
Mm.
It's not something I feel comfortable doing. I grew up in the city. I still live in the city, but I've made the city an environment where I do feel comfortable to go into to nature. And if I'm going into woods, I'm often planning that, walking with a group or
Yeah.
walking with a friend. And I know that some people, depending on their childhood, may not have had a really great experience of some parts of nature, but there's always something
Yeah.
someone, is energized by when it comes to nature, whether it's trees, whether it's woods, whether it's the sea. I told you that I'm down in Ramsgate at the moment. The sea is literally 5 minutes away
Yeah.
where I am. And the vitamin C, as I call it, is what really energizes some people. But I get more energy from being around trees, parks, green spaces. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's whatever energizes you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the beauty about journaling, you mentioned about bringing in the journaling, is that if you go outside with a journal, then you can start to document how you feel. And if you're new to it, you can start to pick up on the patterns. Is it the park? Is it the garden with the greenhouse that you mentioned with your client there and propagating with messing about with the soil and seeing everything grow? Is it the coast? There's always something there that does energize people. I'm reading a book at the moment. It's not here, you might have read it. Holly Wharton
Yeah, the
Talk.
book about trees, lovely book. That's where she's had all these sort of existential experiences with trees.
Yes, with the trees, yeah, and it reminded me because quite often in a lot of those, she picks up on the energetic
Yeah,
feeling of being around trees or in nature, walking through fields, being in a forest on your own. Like you've just said, I don't feel comfortable on my own, but I do a lot of running and hikes and things with groups of people, so it's different. Then you can experience it.
yeah.
But yeah, I remember two of your sessions actually at the Barcelona Festival. You had us all go outside, didn't you? And we were in a reasonable built-up area. So there wasn't any particular parks or anything near us, and you had us looking up to the sky and listening. And it was interesting, that exercise for me, because I had a real divide between what was at ground level with me, with all of I think there was some roadworks going on, and there was cars and people and the concrete of the city. But then looking up, there was this expansiveness, there was, more colour. I tuned into the birds, there was very sort of not an us and them, but I was, as I focused, I was drawing into the energy of the naturalness that was around me, but in the city.
Really, that's a really powerful example of why I do that exercise because it really helps us to become very present in our
Yeah.
bodies, in our minds. And if you think about a lot of us are working with executives and leaders and creatives and entrepreneurs who are trying to do their work in very stressed out environments and very stressed out states. Yeah. And even
Yeah.
coaches and supervisors can be very stressed out as well. The volume of the work that we have and the kind of issues that we're working with. And
Mm.
very simple exercise, which I have to say, it's really interesting. If we think about where we get inspiration from, I would describe myself as very much being a polymath. I'm really interested in different things.
Okay.
Yeah, so that intersection between journaling, nature, writing. I don't read hardly any books on coaching anymore.
Yeah.
Literally read books outside of my profession
Mm.
because I feel like it's such a richer experience because people think differently. They have different experiences, and I'm always going into juxtaposing one experience from a body of work over there into my work as a coach.
Mm.
So the idea behind the exercise that you did at Barcelona came out of years of reading and following Julia Cameron's work.
Ah, yes. Yeah, Morning Pages and The Artist's Way.
So the artist's way was very pivotal in establishing a very strong journaling practice for me.
Mm.
A friend sent me that book in 1990, 91, I think, when it was first published. And it landed on my doorstep on a day when I had been off work for about a week with what I hadn't named at the time as burnout
Mm.
and exhaustion. I just didn't name it. I just thought I couldn't, it was fatigue, but that was what I was experiencing. And I got into that book, and that has become my practice for the next 30 years.
Yeah, wow.
But all of her other books, she's written some fabulous books. She's got one called The Sound of Paper and The Right to Write. Well, both of those books and some of her other books, she starts every single chapter with the description of the weather.
Ah, yes. That
Begins with the description of the weather, particularly when she's in Taos in New Mexico, where she has another home. And what I hadn't realized is how much I had internalized that as a practice. Because about 2 years ago, I started to start my journal entries by writing about the weather. Where my bed is located and where I live now, I literally look up and I can see straight out into the sky on my.
mm,
And I noticed that I began to write about the weather, and it was a really good way of me getting present.
Yeah.
But also, I noticed that my language had become so much more poetic. So I wouldn't write the sky is grey. I would say it's a linen white with speckles in, or do you know what I mean? I would just find language because I think I was really influenced by Julia Cameron because she has this wonderful way of expressing herself poetically and using so many different words to describe the weather.
Mm.
So I realized for myself that that got me really present. And that enabled me to then make that transition into, well, what's the weather forecast? You describe the weather forecast outside. Well, what's the weather like inside of you?
Yeah.
Internal weather forecast. So I use that as a way into writing about my own internal weather forecast. And then whenever something works for me, I think, can this work? Can I put
Yeah. That might work for someone else. It's all about sharing.
Absolutely. And that's what I started to do. I started to bring it into the way I started my coaching sessions with my clients. And they loved it. They were like, oh, this gets me to really be much more in the moment because I had lots of experiences of clients literally coming onto a Zoom call, almost neck first into the camera because they would come out of one Zoom meeting or Teams meeting and literally just landed up in the coaching call. So it's almost like they're coming in from the neck up, but the
Yeah.
rest of them are somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. The logical mind is there, the structural side, but none of the creativity or the expansiveness or the intuitive side is there.
And that expansive, intuitive, creative side is what we as coaches want to tap into. We want to create the space for the client to make that connection because we know that's where their most powerful, expansive thinking happens.
Yeah.
And that's my goal in every coaching session is to hold the container. When I trained as a coach supervisor, Miriam, who was one of the directors of the Coaching Supervision Academy, she talks about the temenos. And that's almost like I hold that as it's like a crucible, it's like a container for creating an energetic space for the client to do their best thinking in.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing in our work. It's what I'm doing when I facilitate or host a workshop. I'm creating that container so that collectively and individually we can, through the journaling process, which I feel is it has the ability to be such a sacred process
Mm.
in our modern world. First of all, when you're holding a pen in your hand and you're writing by hand, you've already onto a winner because you've gone offline.
Yeah.
You know that that's a winner. You've already come out of your screen and you've gone analog and you've given yourself some time away from the digital overload that most of us are heavily weighted down by.
Yeah. Every day. Yeah.
And by having that pen in your hand, and that's why I encourage people to write by hand, Anna, because we know from the research that when they get people to memorize information and data, when they wrote by hand compared to when they typed out what they remembered, those who wrote by hand remember so much more.
Yeah.
So there is so much. People often, this is the most asked question I get around journal writing. Why should I write by hand? Is it
Mm.
important to write by hand? And of course, there are people that will do their journal writing digitally. But my experience has been, and I've watched it, I've observed it, I should say, in workshops. I've had people, just imagine this is your, here is my phone. Imagine this is your phone. they're tapping away on their iPhone. But what I'm noticing is, first of all, that's not a relaxed way to write.
No.
And two, it seems to cut you off from everything else that's around.
Mm.
And so I really do encourage people. And I've experienced it with many of the leaders that I work with in corporates, is that something happens to their state when they grab a notebook and a pen in the session and they start to write.
Yeah.
For example, I might say to a leader, as I have done, okay, do you want to, I give them a journal prompt. You know, they might write about what's on my mind right now. So rather than them speaking it out first, I'll get them to write it down first of all. I'll say to them, oh, just do that for 3 minutes. I'll go on mute, sit quietly on the screen, and I'll just be observing them. And for that 3 minutes, their head hasn't looked up.
Yeah.
So I'll just allow it to continue for a few more minutes, and I won't say time is up until I see their head come up.
Mm.
And sometimes I write for 5 minutes, and then I'll write for 7 minutes. I remember one recent client said, "Oh my God, I've worked out what I need to do."
Yeah.
Hello, coaching session over. But it was such a revelation to her that it took us deeper into what she wanted to explore. And immediately you could see that she was empowered to take control and to motivated and inspired to put the actions because it came from inside of her.
Yeah.
And me as a wise coach, the wise mentor, you know, suggesting or, you know, bringing to her attention, it came from inside of her.
Mm. Yeah. You almost had the match to light the spark, but then she lit the spark and continued. I think it's the process of writing for me is it gets it first of all out of my head so that then it's not rolling around in my head and I don't start ruminating about anything. But then once I can put it down on paper, there is that whole action of the flow with the pen or the pencil, which I think you're right when you mentioned about the phone, that sort of tapping aspect. It's there's no flow in that whatsoever. It's very I don't know, it's very kind of hard and cold in a sense, whereas writing is quite soft, it's flowing and it can just keep going. Whereas I think when you're tapping, it doesn't just keep going. There is that barrier there of the technology of it not necessarily being you. Your hand is lifting up constantly, whereas with a pen, it's a constant and it is an extension of you. So yeah, a lot of what you've just sort of explained there, you can really relate to how that is going to work. And yeah, it reminds me, I had a friend who she does quite a lot of leadership and development coaching with the financial industry, but she does some associate coaching and she's learning a different technique, which is at the moment just holding the space for somebody to think. So she did a session with me last week and all she did was ask me a one question, which is similar to what you've just said, is what I think it was something like, what do you need to think about? And this was talking, not writing, which I normally write. So it was a slightly different experience for me. But as she was saying in my head, I'm thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to speak for half an hour about what I need to think about. But I did. And at one point I said, oh, I might need you to ask me another question. And all she said was, what is it that you're not telling us, you're not telling yourself, or something like that, which just then unleashed me to continue.
That's a great example. I think your friend might be training with Nancy Klein's thinking environment. Klein,
Yes,
yeah, which is
that's
a
it.
it's such a powerful process of really stimulating and activating and using the working memory at the front of the mind to really think about our issues. I know I've met Nancy Klein. I've got her to do workshops through an organization that I used to be a board member of, and I really, really love her work. And that whole concept of the thinking environment, again, is another, it's almost like that is an example of holding a container
Yeah.
space. And the coach is it's their presence and the quality of their listening and their attention that is making the difference.
Mm.
I used to do a lot of coach training, and in the early parts of coaches' careers, we're very caught up with getting the right questions to ask the coachee. And coaches are really keen to have as many questions at their disposal. But the more experienced you become as a coach, the more you appreciate and understand that it's the quality of your presence,
Mm.
how you hold that space with a client. That probably is where your best work happens. And this takes us back to why I really am on a mission to skill up coaches to bring journaling into their coaching work. First of all, journaling is a skills-based practice.
Mm.
It is based on an evidence base. There's scientific evidence based around it, and we can talk about that in a moment. But it does require you to have an understanding and have a knowledge of, first of all, some the different tools and the different techniques that you can use, how to use a prompt, how to use a question, how to bring a journaling prompt into a session and get a client to answer or respond to that prompt, to the question in the session, and then get them to reflect on it. One
Yeah.
of the biggest pieces for me around journal writing, and this is what I've found in my own practice, is and I've got over 100 journals, by the
Ha.
way.
Wow.
I do need to let go of some of them, but I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that. I mean, I may burn some of them, and there is a project called the Great Diary Project, which I will donate a lot of my journals to. But they have followed me across 3 house moves over the last 10. But it's getting a bit much now. But the thing about it is what I have found when I've gone back into my journals, particularly when I've looked over my journals over the course of a year, I think that's the most um, valuable way of engaging with your journals. I am gobsmacked by what I write about in my journals
Yeah.
and how rich my inner life is. I mean, I feel like if I was not here tomorrow, well, look, I've lived a good life.
Mm.
My journals are my testimony to that.
Yeah.
I write about things in my journals, and when I go back in there, if I do a year's review, I'm sometimes like blown away by my own wisdom or my own insight, which if I don't go back and reflect on it, just sits there.
Yes, it's lost almost.
Lost. I'm glad you used that word. And that's why I feel it's really important. Journaling is not just getting words down on a page.
Mm.
This is why, for me, it is very much a skills-based practice. In the same way we teach coaching methodologies, I think there are methodologies to journaling as a practice,
Yeah.
being able to help the client go back in and mine their writing for what they need to extract from it.
Mm.
That's the work that I think we can do very beautifully as coaches. And I think that's something that is even more a skill, and we can be very skillful with it when we do it with ourselves.
Yeah.
It's not just a head thing,
Yeah.
it has to be embodied.
Yes, and they do say that journaling is an embodiment practice, don't they? A bodily practice. But yeah, you're absolutely right, because I started a newer journaling practice this year, because usually I write reams and reams, and then if you don't look back over what was the point in doing it in the first place, because you're not mining, as you say, through what you've written to find out what really matters, what is the message that's trying to get out. So I've started doing more gratitude again, which that's how my journaling practice started, was just through gratitude and being grateful at the end. Well, I did it at the morning and I did it at the end of the day as well. And then it developed from there. So I've gone back to that as well. But I also write down 1 or 2 words that reflect the day. And I'm amazed just after 1 week or just over 1 week that I've gone back and had a look at what I've written and what I've achieved in such a short space of time in a new year. And that gives you the motivation as well to think, it's empowering, it improves your self-esteem, personal development, and all of what you've been saying.
A really lovely example of how you're putting a journaling methodology or technique into practice. At the end of your day, you write down 3 good things
Mm.
that happened.
Sometimes more, yeah.
Yeah. So once you get started, 3 is just a way of getting you going.
Mm.
Often, when I ask myself that question at the end of the day, uh, and I did it the other day, I was like, oh my God, you forgot about this big whopping thing that happened in your day. You
Yeah.
literally forgot about it. But it was the act of starting by writing those things down that got me to remember it.
Mm.
Literally, yeah, 24 hours hadn't even gone by. And I'd forgotten about this good thing that had happened in my day. But writing it down, it's like it stokes your memory bank and you become much more observant around the kind of what's that word when you're it's like the intangibles, the tangibles, the nuances.
Yes. Mm.
Okay? It's not just the big things, it's the nuances. And I think this is really important. So let's put this in context. So you've got this practice where you write down 3 good things that have happened in your day. And I love what you said about 3 words.
Mm.
Because for some people, they might find it hard or they might not have the time to write a narrative.
Yeah.
So writing down, so when we talk about Ryder Carroll's bullet journaling, this is a nice example. Write down 3 words that captures your day. And even if you once you've got those 3 words, those are 3 words that you can come back to.
Yeah.
If you've got a bit more time at the end of your week or at the weekend, you can then look back over your 3 words every day. Now you've got a lovely kind of collection of words that you can go into a bit of a longer write
Mm.
to really pull out what was important, what was stretching, what was challenging, what do you need to pay attention to, what do you want to spend more time with. So now you've got a way that you can go deeper,
Yeah.
extensive. What the research says, the University of Minnesota, they got people in their study to write down good things at the end of the day. That research was also done by Professor Teresa Bloom. And what they found was that not only did they feel better, improve their mental health, and it gave them a way of detaching from the stresses and the difficulties
Mm.
at work. Also, Harvard Business School, they found that when their participants wrote down 3 good things or good things that happened in their day, there was an increase in productivity and work performance.
Yeah.
A bit like, oh my God, being solution focused. I was trained as a solution focused coach at the beginning of my training as a coach. And the whole premise behind solution focus is you look for what works
Mm.
and you do more of it. This research is also deeply embedded in the work of Professor Robert Emmons,
Yes, I've heard of him.
gratitude. Yeah. So, it might seem like a really simple practice, but if we contextualize it in terms of the context and the environments and the challenges that our clients are up against, these are practices that make sense.
Yeah.
And they are practices that are small that can make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think that's a bit of a stumbling block for people sometimes is that they think that they need to dedicate 30 minutes, an hour to this kind of practice, whereas what I'm doing at the moment, it maybe takes me, depending on how much I write, and like you say, you can come back to it if you have more time at another day, 2 to 10 minutes a night. Everybody's got 2 to 10 minutes that they can find. in the evening?
Well, let's put that in another context. How much time do we spend scrolling on social media?
Yeah.
Whenever that question comes up about the time, I know it's an opportunity to have a conversation about how do we spend our time.
Mm,
That's why, for me, it's really important to share how we can bring journaling into our coaching because you're getting your clients to do journaling in real time.
yeah.
So it's not just something that they know is good, but they don't have a kind of bodily experience of doing it and experiencing what it is like to do it in a small designated amount of time.
Mm.
My magic number is 7.
7 minutes.
I like to get people to write on workshops. We tend to start with a 7-minute frame. It's long enough to have some thinking time and to do some writing. But when I'm with the client on a Zoom, a call could be for an hour or a call could be for 90 minutes. I'll often start off with 3 minutes and they get the experience of being focused.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to, they learn very quickly. It doesn't have to be about how much they write. It's about the quality of what they've connected with
Mm,
just in that process, even if it's about their thinking
mm,
as opposed to their writing. So that's why, really helping to train people to understand how to work with the different journaling tools. A journaling tool your listeners might be really interested in is the journal ladder from the work of Kathleen Adams.
yeah.
A really great toolkit of different journaling approaches that starts from very simple 5-minute journal prompts to longer, more experiential journaling techniques and tools like maybe using a reading or sharing a poem, then getting the person to write about their responses to it. That is bringing in more of a creative, it's wider,
Mm,
very focused, and you've got a real range of journaling approaches, tools, and techniques that you can bring in depending on what the client is bringing to the coaching conversation, which I think is just wonderful. And it just changes the dynamic of the coaching conversations in
yeah.
ways.
Yeah, and using something like the journaling ladder because there is that kind of expansiveness of techniques to choose from. People can experiment with them, find out what works for them, go in at a very, very easy level of something, a rung that works for them, if you like, and then experiment more to get more of a deeper practice. When I first came across the journaling ladder, which I've signed up for Kay's Journal to the Self certification, which I'm
Yeah.
going to start this week. But I thought, because I'd read Julia Cameron's Artist's Way first, or I should be honest and say I partly read it because it came to the point where it was too much for me at the time to get in what I wanted to from what she was suggesting. And then I realised actually there's a whole load of techniques here on Kay's ladder that I could be trying first and getting more out of because I'd gone in at the stream of consciousness writing level, but I wasn't necessarily going back and going over and picking out those nuggets. And I think you, Jackee, one of your techniques as well is to reflect on that and pick out the seeds, what you call the seeds and the food for thought, which are those words and those repeated patterns that you can look at over time and gain more from and say, okay, well, this is something that was reoccurring often. What does this mean?
The seeds and the food for thought comes from the work of Dorothy Randall Gray. She wrote a book, Soul Between the Lines, it's called. It's a bit like The Artist's Way, just full of really rich journaling exercises. I think it went out of print, but it's one of those books that if you can get it secondhand, it's a really lovely resource to have.
Mm,
I want to talk a little bit about the collective unconscious because everything is so connected. So Kay with the journal ladder and Kay Adams' book and Deborah Ross's book, Your Brain on Ink,
Hmm.
which is a really good book around the neuroscience and how that relates to journaling and reflective writing. They introduce, now I always get this wrong. I think they call it the reflect write. The idea is that after you've written whatever your journal prompt has been, say you went in with a stream of consciousness, or you did some free association, or you used a journal prompt and you did it for a timed session, that the important piece is to do the reflection at the end. So
Yeah.
that's what Dorothy Rendell Gray is getting you to do when she gets you to go back into your writing, pull out the seeds and the food for thought. So the seeds are the words that strike you, stand out, speak to you, and the food for thought are longer themes or kind of nuggets that are coming out of the writing. What Deborah and Kay are suggesting that you do is that you go back into the writing, so you read over it, and you then do a second piece of writing, which gets you to respond to what you notice, what do you observe, what do you feel, what you're aware of, what are you surprised by, what do you need to be thinking about. That
Mm.
it's really emphasizing how important it is not just to ruminate on the page, like you
Yeah.
talked earlier. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck with journaling, and why, introducing these different concepts, these different frames, and these different structures are really important, because it breaks the pattern of rumination becoming a self-defeating prophecy.
Mm.
You don't want to be going over the same thing all the time. You've got to find a way through it. And the way through it is to have these techniques that helps you to go into access the prefrontal cortex and go into your working memory.
Yeah.
That's what's happening when you're doing the reflect right or the right reflect. I never know which one it is. That's what you're doing. That's why the work of Dr. James Pennebaker, seminal researcher on writing about trauma, writing about difficult experiences, his work, which is a big longitudinal study that's been going for over 20 years, that's kind of progressed into being able to support individuals to go back into their writing and to notice what was making a difference to people's writing that did not keep them in that space of ruminating.
Yeah.
And what they found, I think in this book, The Secret Life of Pronouns, it's not necessarily an easy book to read, but there's lots of other books that he's written that I think are much more accessible. But that whole work around The Secret Life of Pronouns is what they realized from the research is that when people were able to make meaning of that difficult experience, that challenge. And they were using words like, now I recognize, or now I feel, now I see the thing that is different. When they were using particular words that took them from the negative and they began to use more positive language,
Yeah.
the impact really, really changed.
Yeah.
We know from those studies from writing about trauma that it has an impact on people physically, psychologically, emotionally, on immune systems, blood counts, less visits to the doctors, lower stress levels, all of these things.
Yeah. And they're all statistically proven. There's the facts there.
Definitely. So this is why I say it's a skills-based practice.
Yeah.
I think what I love about it, Anna, is a skills-based practice that's accessible.
Mm.
No
Yeah.
disrespect to the profession of coaching. You've got to have at least 10 grand to train properly. It's not really that accessible. I know
Mm.
lots of people have trained as coaches, but actually, for me, in terms of making a difference in the world, journaling is something that we can create communities
Mm.
where people are more aware and more empowered. Just think about the difference that people will make in their communities right where they are because this is a practice that becomes a part of their lived experience.
Yes. Yes, you can embed it into their life. It can become a daily habit or a habit whenever you need it, when it needs to be there. Because I think it's, it doesn't have to be every day at the same time, does it? That's a barrier for some people. But yeah, creating those communities, which is probably a nice point to mention your writing and journaling circle with Fiona on a Tuesday, which I've attended I think 3 times now since meeting you, and that's a great space that you create, and it's a wonderful community there. And I think with the prompts that you do, and you kind of gently eases into it because it starts at 7 a.m. in the morning, which is quite early.
Not everyone's cup of tea at 7 o'clock in the morning.
It's not, but I think for what people gain from it, it's well worth
Yeah.
getting up. And there is this sort of collective energy. And the poem that you read last time from Zaina Keithley, was it about hope, was
Yeah.
phenomenal. It was wonderful. And at any piece like that that just gets you thinking, gets the pen writing, and when you look back over what you've written, you sometimes say, wow, did that really come from me? But everything that's there is meaningful for you at that time. It's very powerful.
Anna, just said that so beautifully, capturing the magic of why Fiona and I have been co-hosting this space for the last 4 years. We set it up when we were just coming out of COVID. We wanted to create a space where we could create a safe space for women to come together and journal, and it has just grown. And, for me, it's about community. And it allows me as a polymath. You see, I'll just be on my Instagram and I'll see something and I'll go, oh, dot that in my library.
Yeah.
Now, I think actually one of our community members, when she covered for one of us, she introduced us to Zaina Keithley.
Right.
And do you know what I mean? So
Mm.
it's like I feel like an octopus that is just my inspiration is coming in from so many different places. Sometimes I might just see something on a billboard, take a photo. There might be some words on there that becomes our prompt for that particular week. And
Yeah.
there's an aliveness in it. Don't we want engineers who are alive? Don't
Mm.
we want bus drivers who are alive? Don't we want nursery workers who are alive?
Yeah.
You know,
Most.
that's what journal keeping is about.
Mm. Definitely. We want that lifeline, that energy, nothing that's, yeah, cold and static and unreal.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, not everyone is going to be a journal keeper. I know that. This is about choice. And I will also say, I have introduced it to people who, let's just think about some of the male leaders that I worked with. Again, I'm thinking about another doctor. He used to say to me every week, oh, this is so helpful.
Yeah.
All of his thoughts used to be in his head. He said, it impacted my marriage, Jackee. It's changed my relationship with my sons.
Yeah. Life changing.
A game changer.
Mm.
And I'll often say, I'm in the process of writing my book. It's got a working title, my next book, I should say, um, called Rooted Wisdom, which is all about my lived experience with trees. And I've forgotten the point I was going to make now. Um,
Because you didn't write it down. I'm only joking.
yeah, I didn't write it down, and I wanted to make a point from what I just said about the
You were
trees.
talking,
No,
I
maybe
was, yeah, I was just trying to prompt you a little bit. You were talking about the doctor and how it had changed his marriage, and then with his sons, um, and how we were talking about being real. How we wanted the bus drivers and everybody to be real.
yeah, and thank you. And I've just totally forgotten the point. There was a juxtaposition there that I wanted to make, but
Yeah,
it'll come.
it'll come back.
You just said to me, Anna, as well, the fact that I didn't write it down. That's why I do find it so valuable to write it down. Can I show you something?
Please do.
This book is what I call my common purpose book. It's where if I listen to a podcast, sometimes I will write down some of the things that I hear the interviewee say, and I will be able to bring that into a workshop.
Mm.
Sometimes I'm inspired by something that I've heard, and I'll create a exercise based on that will come into a workshop. So this my common purpose book is inspired by. Have you ever heard of them? Commonplace books.
No, not heard of that.
So commonplace books were like books where you write down your thoughts and you're thinking they've been around for a long time. They go as far back as China, I think it was. And I kind of just developed my common purpose book from that because it's where it's like a seed bed where I kind of keep all of my ideas. And this is where I get a lot of inspiration for the work that I
Mm.
do. And it's why my bags are also heavy. I've got to find a different way of doing this. I think I'm going to have to get a remarkable because honestly, I've come down to Ramsgate on this writing residency. You'd think I was going to the Caribbean for 3 weeks. But honestly, these are my treasure. And then I have my journal, which
Yeah.
I do my morning reflections. So I'm just writing a new course for something that I'll tell you about it in a minute. And so, you talked about doing your reflections at the end of the day. It's a free course that we want to make available on a new website that we've created. And the idea is that I'm introducing people who might be new to journaling or want to get back into journaling to do their morning pages first thing.
Hmm.
But I have a little cheat sheet with morning pages. I say just do 3 pages of whatever notebook you're writing in. Because she's an advocate of 3 pages of like A4 kind of.
Yes.
Yeah. I just say 3 pages in the notebook that you're working in. And I talk about how important it is to have a clearing space for your thoughts and your feelings and get it down on a notebook.
Mm.
And then I've introduced the idea. I kind of go into, well, I found morning pages has been really helpful for me over the last 30 years. So wouldn't the concept or the idea of evening pages be equally as valuable? Because
Yeah.
some people are going to be more likely and up for writing in the evening before they go to bed. But that came out of some research that I did for my most recent article in Psychology's magazine.
Ah, here we
So that-
go.
oh, yeah, there you go. My Right to Flourish column in Psychology's magazine, where I kind of introduce a different journaling tool or technique every month. And the last one I've just written about, Anna, is about the impact of journaling on better sleep because I've been
Mm.
struggling with my sleep for the last 4 to 5 months. And it suddenly dawned on me that my sleep hygiene was off.
Yeah.
It was really off. And so I started going back to bringing out my journal at bedtime, writing down the good stuff that happened during the day. And that's where that whole memory recall was
Mm.
really, really helpful. And I would sometimes find myself with a smile on my face because I'd remember all this stuff that had happened in the day that
Yeah.
if I'd gone to bed without, sifting through the day, writing in my journal, I'd have forgotten about it.
Mm.
And of course, what we found from the research is that it's the rumination and the worry that we take to bed with us that causes a lot of the disturbance in our sleep. And I was like, of course, this makes sense.
Yeah.
And it is, it's definitely changing the quality of my sleep. And the big game changer was keeping a sleep journal
Yeah. Great.
diary. Honestly, I was like, oh, so when I drink more water in the day, when I get my walk in the day, when I take my journal to bed, oh, you managed to not wake up in the middle of the night.
Yeah. And had you not started that practice, that wouldn't have come to light.
It would have, like you said earlier in our conversation, it would have been information and data that was lost to me.
Mm.
And it's that kind of not being open to what's going on internally that deadens us.
Yeah. And I think we can have a way of just shutting that down. If we feel tired, then even if we feel tired, we can still have a disruption, a disruptive night's sleep, can't we? It doesn't have to, doesn't mean that we're going to fall asleep and have quality sleep if we feel tired. And the easiest thing is just to think, I'm just going to go to bed and put my head down. And it does take an intention to say, right, I'm going to write about this in my journal, get my journal out. I'm just going to quick reflection of the day. As you've already said, that can help you to improve your mood as well, because you've realized, oh, this happened during the day. But then it is a log of something that you can go back to and you can reflect over that and spot the pattern. And then you've got information that you can use to make a decision that's best for you.
I feel so much more empowered around doing something about my sleep. It's something I wanted to, I knew it because it meant that like sometimes in the middle of the day, I just get really tired. So that impacts my productivity and my performance, so it was an important thing for me to address. And lo and behold, I get to see that journaling was a tool that I could really use to change the quality of my sleep.
Yeah, yeah. There are so many benefits. We could keep talking forever about them, couldn't we?
Honestly, can I leave you with a couple of uh, more pieces of research that I personally found really helpful?
Yeah, please do.
There was some research that was done by James Pennebaker and Spurrier et al. With a group of engineers. I think this is in the 1990s. And what I love about this particular group, when James Baker introduces them in his book, I think it's in the book Opening Up, um, he says they were the most grouchy, sort of cantankerous group of men. Like they were like the hardest group that he's kind of had to work with.
Yeah.
What they got them to do was they got one half of the group to just write about what they did in their day, which is much more transactional.
Mm.
And then the other half wrote about how they felt. Because this group of engineers, sorry, I should contextualize it, they were facing redundancy after having worked at this company for many, many years.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it was quite a big change in their career history. And obviously they were really not happy about being made
Mm.
redundant. Those who wrote about their feelings and the emotions and the process of what they were going through, even though they didn't want to do it, guess what? They got jobs faster and quicker and they felt better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, come on, this is really, really helpful.
Mm.
Not an easy group to work with. Not they were journaling resistant, let's just say.
Mm.
And yet the impact is there.
Yeah. The proof is there of the practice. And yeah.
Absolutely. Then, if obviously our sessions on Tuesday mornings are a women only space, but on the whole, for most journal writing courses that Fiona and I either do individually or when we come together and work, predominantly women.
Mm.
So where are the men?
Yeah.
And how are men engaging with journaling? Well, actually, a lot of the researchers in this field tend to, a lot of the names that come up are male.
Mm.
James Baker, Joshua Smith, Matthew Lieberman. So I'm really interested at this intersection. What's the value of journaling? And I think there is something about the term journaling that kind of puts a lot of men off.
Yeah, the language that's used to describe it. Yeah.
Yeah. But that aside, Matthew Lieberman um, and others found that men benefited psychologically and emotionally more when they were engaged in a study of keeping a journal than
Mm,
women.
mm,
Now, for me, the way I've interpreted those findings is that the psychological benefit for men was greater because more women tend to journal than men. So when men did it, it's almost like they got a bigger
yeah. The change or
outcome.
the difference was so much. Yeah.
So to me, that really, I really want to invite coaches to really think about this. Don't be put off by bringing these tools into your work with male leaders.
Mm, yeah.
I can remember some work, some coaching work that I did with a senior director, a director of one of our zoos in the UK.
Hmm.
And the, the the process of slowing down and observing and reflecting on how he was showing up in his work, the impact on the quality of the relationships he was having with his team, having some time in the sessions to write down his thinking and his thoughts, changed a very kind of uncomfortable experience that he was having around his leadership and his
Mm,
into one where he was able to shape and change the direction of where he was going and how
yeah.
he was feeling about
Yeah.
leadership of that particular organization.
Yeah. Super powerful.
Super powerful.
Yeah.
We really can't underestimate the value of this work.
Mm. No, and the more, as you were saying before, getting this message out there in the communities, the more that people can hear about it, try it, spread the word, just see for themselves the benefits is all that needs to happen. And then they can talk about it to more people. And then coming back to the analogy of the tree, and those saplings and those shoots and the seeds are dropping and everybody's growing from this
Absolutely.
as a practice.
And your podcast is another way that we're really, it's like if we think about this field of expressive writing, journal writing, therapeutic writing. I mean, there's so many different names you can give to it. This is a great way of adding to that body of
Mm.
knowledge. This is such an important podcast, and I feel very appreciative of having this time to talk to you and for us both to share our real life experiences of this work. I think it's really important. And I'd like to just let your listeners know that we are about to launch the School of Journaling, Fiona and
Yes.
myself, here in the UK. It's where we've now created a home for our Tuesday morning, early morning writing sessions. And we also have created a space now by having the website and setting up the School of Journaling, where we are going to be sharing resources and linked to other collaborators, other teachers like yourself who are out here doing the work in that intersection between journaling, writing, and nature. Fiona and I both have a love of nature and we both have a love of journaling. And that's how we came together many, many years ago. And so now we've got a home for it.
Yeah. Brilliant.
At some point we're going to be doing some in what we call interviews.
Ah, wonderful.
They're going to be interviews with guests like yourself. I will be delighted to have you on the podcast as well.
Oh,
Well, I'm not sure I'm calling it a podcast because if we think about being a planner or a pantser, I'm very much an ideas person. So you've got to start me off small, otherwise I can get overwhelmed really quickly. So if I just say to myself that we're going to be doing a series of interviews for a season, I think that would be a lovely way, certainly that I will ease myself into it, and then I can see, or we can see what emerges from there.
Yeah, I love the way that that sounds, the interviews. You can already feel it here. There's something's and there's something's waiting to kind of get out from the people that you have the conversation with around those interviews. Yes, thank you for bringing that up because it was something I wanted to mention. Yes, you got one of your writing maps there as well.
If I have, I just thought I'd pull these up because I love these. You know, when sometimes you write something for yourself and then you get to share it with others. So this was the first writing map, Writing with Fabulous Trees, that we did. It was 2019. And the idea behind, do you know, I love the way it's pocket size.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
you
I
can take it with you. Go outside for a walk.
know that. Put it into your pocket. It's not heavy, but it is filled with 12 creative writing prompts that if you ever get stuck when you're out and you think, oh, well, what am I doing? What am I going to write about? You could just take one of these as a bit of inspiration,
Yeah,
get onto the page. You know, I think when we're outside in nature, that can be a really great writing space, away from your desk, away from your laptop, away from your phone, hopefully, and just being able to have a resource of different writing prompts. You know, one prompt gets you to think about a tree that you're close to, you know, observe the tree, touch the trunk, rest your back against the tree, think about its shades, what's the sound that the leaves might be making, what's the texture of the bark like, and then think about a conversation you might want to have with a tree. And the idea is that you're getting out of your head,
yeah.
getting into your body, you're exploring your internal world through a different
Mm,
portal of the tree. And so it was really designed to stimulate people's creativity when they're out and about. And then in 2021, and that's Sean, who's the publisher, Sean Levin, who's the publisher of the Writing Maps, we did Rewilding the Page,
yeah.
the urban forest writing map. And this whole idea is around being able to walk around the city and use nature in the city as inspiration.
And that one is more for the people that perhaps don't have the accessibility to be able to get out to a forest or a wood, just to be able to step out into the area, the city, or the you know the built up area that they are in, day out, and really gain some of the same benefits from being completely the countryside.
Well, that's why I did this particular map and why the tagline is the urban forest
Mm,
writing map. Because we tend to sometimes generalize as if living in an urban nature is devoid of nature.
yeah, which it isn't.
Not true. I live in London, grew up in South London, still live in South London. There's over 300 parks in London. Over a third of London is green space.
Mm,
London was voted as the first national park city.
yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of people would find that hard to believe if they didn't hear that.
Mm.
Yeah, I was quite surprised when you said that in Barcelona that there's that much green space there.
Well, I know it.
Mm,
I've walked a lot of it. I've experienced it through my feet.
yeah.
So it's not just in my head. You know, without even knowing those stats, I already had experienced that.
Mhm.
I've clocked up over 10,000 hours of walking and running. And
Wow.
one of the things about my walking and running is I used to run from one park in South London to another park. And then I just got further and further. So I would run out of South London. You know, I'm not a runner now, but I'm a walker. You know, I've got trees all over the city that I can call old friends. I can go into an area and think, oh, that tree, let me go and visit it.
Yeah.
And I love that about the city. I love that we have trees in the UK that are not to the UK. We've literally got every single tree from around the world.
Mm,
I discovered a massive redwood in a small strip of an ancient forest that once was in the area of South London that I lived in called the Great North Woods. That part of South London where I grew up in, called West Norwood, was part of the Great North Wood.
Mm.
Discovered during COVID a massive towering redwood tree in this little strip of the Great North Wood that had been preserved, and it was hidden.
Yeah.
I only discovered it because my therapist's office was at the top of this tall Georgian house that he lived in. And he told me about this strip that not many people knew about, that had been preserved by friends of Stambourne Woods in Crystal Palace. And I could literally, I said to him, what's that tall tree over there? He said, I'm not sure. And I went and I found it.
Wow. And it was the redwood.
I discovered it. It was just, it was one of those moments of absolute awe. I stood there, obviously, I'm quite tall, but looking up at this redwood in my own neighborhood, I just felt like a small part of the universe.
Yeah.
It
Which
was
we
just,
are, aren't we?
yeah.
We are one little speck of something that's so much grander.
And then a few weeks later, I took my sister and my daughter to see the redwood. You have to go through quite a lot of brambles. It's like a bit of an adventure. And then we went back a few months later. Do you know, honestly, it still strikes me. I mean, and that is the operative word. It got struck by lightning.
Oh no. Oh, what a
When we
shame.
found it, literally snapped in two.
Oh, do you know, I find that sort of thing absolutely devastating. And it really kind of, it really gets me here when I see trees that have been chopped down. I mean, that's Mother Nature, but when it's been chopped down, and we normally get a real Christmas tree. And for the first time this year, I thought, I don't want to get a real Christmas tree. I tried to get, when I lived on my own, I tried to get one that was potted so that I could grow
Yeah.
it. And it didn't work for whatever reason. I think I might have overwatered it or whatever I did. I didn't have the green fingers at the time. But yeah, that really sort of gets to me.
I really hear that, and I guess that, and I think that's why there was such an outpouring when the sycamore gap tree was cut down
Yeah,
by Hadrian's Wall. It really symbolized what trees mean to so many people.
yeah,
That's how
yeah.
I felt about the redwood.
Yeah, you can tell even the energy between us now when we're doing this online, it's kind of dipped a little bit, hasn't it? As we're thinking about the trees. But for now, we've talked about the journaling circle with Fiona, which is Tuesday mornings at 7 a.m. We've talked a little bit about your new venture with the journaling school. So we can share all links about these. There's a lot of people that you've mentioned, which I'll include in the show notes as well. You've got your psychologist column, all of these writing resources. We've not even talked about your other
Yeah,
books yet. But where's the best way for people to reach you? Should they want to, come and find you, learn more?
I have a very old, antiquated website which will get updated at some point, but I've got so many other things I want to do. And that's at Jackee, www.jackee, Jackee, Holder, Holder.com. If you want to find out what I'm up to in a way that's more current, please follow me on Instagram. And that again is my name, Jackee Holder Inspires. And I share a lot more about the kind of things that I'm up to. I do a little bit more around my walking, being out in nature. LinkedIn is a space that I'm using more.
Mhm.
Um, so again, that is my name, Jackee Holder.
Wonderful.
And also, I just want to remind people, I created a card deck. It's called the Inner and Outer Nature Self-Discovery Card Deck. It's got 49. Oh, there you go. It's got 49 journaling prompts that are all inspired by nature. And it's a lovely way, again, of getting yourself onto the page, but also a way of connecting into nature or deepening your connection with nature. and it's really inspiration for your journal writing practice.
Yeah, and what I like about your pack of cards, Jackee, is that they are, again, a little bit like the writing maps, is they're small, you can pop them in your bag, you can take them anywhere with you. A lot of these card packs are quite bulky and quite heavy.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, they are great. You can just pop them in your bag. Think about it as, part of your arsenal that you
yeah.
take with you when you go out there every day. Yeah.
Lovely. That's what I'm designed for. I'm all about little but large.
And that's what makes the bigger difference. I think you said something earlier, it is those small things that create that big impact.
Yeah.
And we have to start from somewhere and build and grow. And there's the metaphor of the tree growing again. But it's been absolutely fabulous to chat to you. The time has just flown by. So let's do this again. Best of luck for the retreat. It's been very inspiring. And I've learned a lot from you this morning as well. So with the listeners.
Oh, thank you. And it's been great speaking with you. And I look forward to speaking to you again in the near future.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's Writing with Purpose podcast. Having conversations with fellow writers or adventure enthusiasts brings two of my biggest loves in life together, writing and nature connection. I've been a copywriter and content creator for 23 years, but my passion is writing for well-being, and I'm on a mission to share the benefits that putting pen to paper has for personal wellness with as many people as possible. If you want to learn more about writing for your well-being and journaling techniques, please connect with me in my Facebook group, Journaling with Anna.